Hi, everybody. It's good to see such a nice bunch of folks out here. You know, at my age, I got to be careful, you know, because I find myself in the garage sometimes trying to figure out what I'm doing in there. And well, I put most of this all down, so I'll be able to be sure I include everything that I intended to talk to you about. But age is something. I don't even buy green bananas anymore. But along with other impairments, I don't hear very well. But I do have one kind of a cute story to tell you, and that happened at a wedding a number of years ago, when after the ceremony, the preacher came down and he said, well, how many folks have you been married? Have you been married? Well, they went through 30, 40, 50. Finally, they got to 60, and I was the only hand up. And so he said, congratulations. And to what do you owe the longevity of this wonderful marriage? And I said, hey? And he said, to what do you owe the longevity of this marvelous marriage? And I said, being hearing impaired. But despite all of that, I did do something. I invited Georgia Zink because she is retired from administration, state? Yeah. And she has worked with computers, and she started a web page on the White School. But I had to find some place to start. And I went all the way back to probably the patriarch of the White family, who was born, if you believe, in 1599 in a little town called Tickleport, England. And this is in the Dorset area. This would be in the southern part of England. Those of you from World War II may remember a beautiful romantic song, The White Cliffs of Dover. There be the white cliffs of Dover tomorrow, just you wait and see. I know I remember it well. Anyhow, getting back to where I was before, I was thinking about a girl from England. Memories, memories. Well, anyhow, this guy by the name of Thomas White is the patriarch of all of the whites, that branch of whites in America. He arrived in Plymouth Rock, or Plymouth, Massachusetts, in 1625. That was about 4.5 years after the Pilgrims. But he moved from there to a town called Plymouth, Massachusetts. And there he was one of the founding fathers. He, I don't know, will this thing help? Yeah. Or can you hear all right, Johnny?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. Now, from there, they ended up in a town called Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire. I went out to Fitzwilliam with my son, and I could not hardly believe it. It's just an acre of granite boulders. And why they left New Hampshire, I can understand, because I can't imagine anyone running a plow through any of that farm country out there. And you can imagine what they must have felt when they arrived here in Verona, and with this beautiful, rich, fertile prairie soil. Anyhow, to go on, I can even go back a little bit further with that, because 5 generations after Thomas, you know, great, 5 times, he had a son by the name of oh my, isn't that terrible? Stephen White. And Stephen White volunteered at 17 to serve in the American Revolution. Stephen served 15 months, and he was with his company from New Hampshire at the battle at Yorktown when General Braddock gave his sword to General Washington, and when the Revolutionary War ended, because the Englishmen all got on their ship and they went back to England. It was a few years later when they made a peace treaty. But anyhow, Stephen Jr.'s son then volunteered to fight in the War of 1812. And part of his land that he got out in New Hampshire was a bounty for serving in the War of 1812. They were rewarded with land. Then, interestingly enough, Stephen Jr.'s son was named Warren White. And Warren volunteered as a bugler in the Civil War with the 2nd Cavalry, a unit of volunteers from Wisconsin. Can you imagine a father, Revolutionary War, a son in the War of 1812, and his grandson in the Civil War? The bugler, Warren, became disabled and returned to Verona and was discharged from the Civil War. I just cannot help but wonder how many families there might be in this country with that kind of distinction. I know one thing, and that is that in the Verona Cemetery, there is a monument to Stephen White Jr. and his son Warren, and Mary White, his wife. Oh, let's see, where from here? Oh, here, that's the monument. Thank you, Georgia. Well, let's see, what have I forgotten now? There is plenty of evidence to document the fact that Thomas White was born in 1599, came here, and then eventually, 5 generations later, his descendants migrated here to the Verona area. Now, the first one that probably came was one of the boys by the name of Brayton White. He didn't like Brayton, apparently, and he went by the name Peter. Well, anyhow, he got here in 1841, and he married a gal by the name of Jessie Black. That was fire Kitefoot. See? That is probably one of the first marriages in the town of Verona. Peter White and Jessie Black. Now, no pun intended. Interestingly enough, though, is that there is no marriage certificate. So whatever happened to Brayton and Jessie, I couldn't find, nor could I find a wedding certificate or a death certificate or any evidence of being married in Verona. So while that's a story, it's probably not what you could say authenticated. So while it's an interesting comment, I would not want to leave here with you the impression that this actually happened, because there is no conclusive evidence for it. You see, genealogy researchers love the White family because they not only go back to Thomas White, but they go back another 8 generations, that's great, 8 times, to a fellow by the name of D. White, Thomas D. White. The last name in early England was spelled W-H-Y-T-E. Then, if that isn't, other researchers have gone back another 6 generations to an Italian. Let me get it so I get it straight. Geraldo Gerandini. And this guy was born in 980 in Italy. But again, remember I said, you got to watch out what you read sometimes, because there's really not conclusive evidence that this happened. But if we do go back to that Italian guy, my great-granddaughter, and this is true, her name's got a cute name, she's only 2 years old, Phoebe Magnolia. Phoebe Magnolia Rogers would be the 33rd generation. Now, one of the nice things is that the Mormon Church, or Church of the Latter-day Saints, had a belief that those of us on earth could help our ancestors, praying for them, tithing for them, this sort of thing. So many years ago, they started probably the finest assemblage of records anybody has ever put together. So you sign up with an outfit called Ancestry.com, and it's, they charge for it, but you can go back and look and trade. So all of the stuff that I pick up here are telling you about, other people have researched it, except you got to watch out for errors, because people can put anything they want, on the internet, and with no documentation, and you got to watch out as to what you think is good evidence. I do not agree with all of the evidence for back to D. White nor to the Italian guy, because I don't think it's backed up by what you would say any documentary evidence. And you have to recognize, many of the women had the babies at home, so they never registered anything. And in those days, just think of how many passed away on the farm. And they didn't register anything. All they did was they had a funeral, buried them. So trying to find these records and substantiate them with evidence is very, very, very difficult. It's probably one of the things that makes genealogy so interesting. But I got to go on now. I get carried away with some of this stuff. Let's go back to Stephen White, Jr. That's the guy that served here in the Revolutionary War. They had 13 children. Now, having that many kids in those days was not such a bad idea. That's to get the chores done and the cooking done and everything. Taking care of the housework and everything. So the number of whites that started to grow at an exponential rate. Now, there is some evidence that indicates this breaking that I told you about, but it's not definitive. And we do know that the first one to definitely arrive, because I find it in the 1840 census, was Addison White. Now, he didn't come here, he came to Middleton, and or at least the problem with that 1840 census is that it includes the town of Verona and the town of Middleton. So it's kind of hard to pick out, who lives where. But he is in 1840. And then again in 1850, in that particular census. And of course, the 1860 census is a good one, because that's got all of the fellows that volunteered in the Civil War. Anyhow, when Stephen they settled, or the whites settled, in the northwest corner of the town of Verona. And in a short time after Addison, Solomon arrived. And he joined his brother with adjoining farms. Their farms were right up in that northwest corner, where the Jewish community has the swimming pool and their recreation center out there. And then, of course, according to Ancestry.com, it talks about the descendants from there on. So the record of whites in Wisconsin and in Verona is very, very well documented from Stephen White on down. And actually back on that under Tom White, who arrived shortly after the Pilgrims. This is easily accessible, again, on Ancestry.com by merely paying the fee, of course, and then signing in and looking up family trees. There are about 800 individuals who are researching the White family, this particular branch of the White family. And most of them were in New Hampshire, most of them are in New England. But the ones here in the Verona area would be descendants of Addison and Solomon. And then, of course, if you wonder about what it was like for those folks coming across the country and then arriving here, Martha White, one of the daughters, wrote an excellent article back in when Wisconsin Centennial, or Verona Centennials were first originated. So, again, going back, even though genealogy is not an easy subject, it's safe to say that there are probably thousands of descendants of the Whites from England in the United States. And I'm pretty sure that there would be several hundred or more in the Wisconsin area. Now you might say, like who? Well, of course, there'd be Himpsels, there'd be Zink, Shares, I don't know how many, Father Nicholas, he was a chaplain with the military before he retired. The Nicholas farm would be just on down from the soccer fields on cross country. That one farmhouse on the left, going east on the left-hand side, was the Nicholas farm. And the Nicholas branch would have maybe 40, 50 descendants from, again, going back to the White that served in the Civil War, or in the Revolutionary War, excuse me. All the thing, well, this is Morris Pond. That was the Morris farm. Their son Wayne went on to become a senator in Oregon, has the distinction of one of the longest filibusters in the history of the United States Senate. He was very proud of his being you heard of the Daughters of the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution. Well, there's also Sons of the American Revolution. And Wayne Morris used that all the time. And it went all the way back to the Stephen White I referred to before in the Revolutionary War. Well, let's see where I am in my notes here now. I would guess, like I said, there has to be several hundred of you folks who are descendants, and like my little granddaughter is a descendant. We could go on and on with different, for instance, Weilands, old Doc Weiland, married into the Dunkel family. Ed Dunkel had married one of the White girls, and he went off to service. All the way, I don't know, I put together another list. There's 107 Verona boys and men that volunteered in the Civil War. And that was from a town with a total of 180 families. And a third of them were casualties, by the way. That's another story. Now, if we go back to the history of Verona, a mere 5 years after John Stewart and James Young arrived, a log schoolhouse was built on the west side of the Sugar River. Huh?
That's Tom Stewart.
Is it Tom Stewart, not Jim?
Not John, Tom.
Excuse me. You see how easy it is to make errors? Yeah. Thank you, Donnie. Oh boy, I gotta get rid of that. Don Stewart. Tom.
We get mixed up. If Tom had a son,
Yeah.
his first son will be John,
Yeah.
and his second son will be Tom. When John had a son, why his first son will be Tom and his second son will be John. So unless you have a nickname, you can't
Sounds
keep
like a
them straight.
Norwegian.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say,
needed
I
that.
am no.
I am too.
You ought to use up all the names. Keep repeating.
Illustration. That's right. Keep family trees squared and straightened out. Like I said, why these people left Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, because it is a very picturesque little New England community, and came all the way to Verona, we really don't know, except, and you imagine how thrilled they must have been with the crop of wheat that they could grow on that prairie soil. Now their journey, as I said, is pretty well recorded by Martha. I suppose that the best way to go from here is to continue with a little bit more on the two schools that were built but were abandoned. The school on the west side of the Sugar River was just a year or so, and then they built one. It would be about where Nesbitt Road takes off on the east side of Verona, someplace around in there, because it was built on county-owned land. But again, it wasn't in a very good location, so they decided that they would abandon that one. And anyhow, both of these, it would be interesting, it could be a project to try to find out whether or not there was a teacher and whether or not who the students may have been in those first two attempts at a schoolhouse in the town of Verona. But by now, old Addison and Solomon had built a home, nice farmhouse. In fact, Addison ended up with 3 farms. He even had the farm across PD from Morris Pond, running right along him. That was an Addison White farm. But anyhow, they decided that the boys needed some education, so their sister Mary Etta. Now again, some confusion, because some of the records will indicate her name was Mary Ethel. Others will have it as Mary and Etta, E-T-T-A, and the third bunch of records will indicate that it was one word, Marietta. When they built the subdivision where the high school was built, you'll notice that was Marietta Street. Anyhow, I get carried away. Watch out. But can you imagine that Addison then had the schoolhouse in his home? One room in the Addison farmhouse was the school, and Marietta was the teacher. They did this in 48 and in 1849. Finally, on April 20th of 1850, they organized the first school district. Addison was elected to head the school board, and a decision was made to build a schoolhouse for $160. And it was on a site that the Whites donated. Now, there's again a question. It could have been Solomon or it could have been Addison. I'm going to try to look up the ref. I'm going to the courthouse, and maybe I can straighten that out. Now, if you were the location, I think we all know where the White School is located. It's along the road that later became PD, and it's just before it intersected with Timberlane Road. Now, it was about 4 miles northwest of the little community, which was called at that time Verona Corners. The district, the first school district, was named the White School District. And the building they built was called the White School. The road to the south became White Crossing Road. See, there were no bridges, and so they just built the ford and threw some stones in and whatnot. But to identify which crossing it was, they usually would use someone who took care of it and whatnot. That's why that white crossing was the crossing on the upper reaches of the Sugar River, and became White Crossing Road. Now, with that as a background, I'm sure there are a lot of colorful and lovely stories surrounding this beautiful little one-room schoolhouse that has operated in the same location for 115 years. Now, if that isn't enough, it's still there, and it's been there 164 years. Now, what wonderful memories all the various teachers and the students and their parents must have. And as we reminisce, let's not forget that currently we're indebted to the Goodman Jewish Community Campus that maintains the site. Now, I ask a couple of questions, and think about it. Is it possible that some consideration should be given to recognizing this particular site for its historical significance? I ask another question. Would this make an interesting project for the Verona Historical Group? And then I ended, maybe a suitable marker is a possibility. Anyhow, it's a couple ideas to mull around. With that, I sure want to thank you, but before I do have to introduce George Zink. As I said, George has put together a lot of material, and boy, she's going to gather a lot of others too. So brought some, others brought some stuff. We're going to bring some old memories and whatnot too. And do you want to stay right there?
Yeah.
Would you want to have this
screen.
thing?
Well, I need the one that's on the screen. Can everybody hear me?
Better use the mic.
Okay.
But anyhow, again, I sure want to thank you for inviting me and asking me to share some of the history of this remarkable family and this outstanding remnant of the era when over 1,800 one-room classrooms dotted the early history of the state of Wisconsin. With that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
Georgia.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Oops. Break. Start out with technical difficulties.
Maybe I can get him.
Okay, I've talked to Ed in the past. We've compared notes, but I wasn't quite sure what he was going to cover. So I'm going to kind of wing it, and I will give you out some information. I've made just several printouts of some of these web pages. I'll give you some addresses. I've been putting everything on blogs on the internet. I'm still gathering. I still have things from my parents and things from other people that I've still been adding to it. The easiest way to get to everything is the blog that I've created for the Verona Cemetery. And the easiest way to get to that without having to remember, for those of you that use a computer or have people that can access it, is just do a search for the Verona Cemetery on Yahoo. And the first item that comes up for me, you can see there on the board, is Verona Cemetery, and I'm going to click on that. Now, as Ed's mentioned, people do a lot of researching and adding of records. I've worked with something called findagrave.com. I refer to it as FAG, which I winced at the first couple of times, but people that communicate on the internet with it use it instead of typing it out all the time. And Ancestry.com, newspapers.com, and a few other websites to do my research. And I've done a lot of adding to Ancestry and Find a Grave. Last summer, I've worked on the Verona Cemetery for 3 years, but last summer I did a full walkthrough and took pictures of every stone there. And I've added that. And that's what's resulted in this blog, and there are several different sections of it. One's the military, which has all the military interments. But from that page, if you click on history, it will take you to history of the cemetery. And up at the top, you'll see family, white family and white school. Like I said, I'm still adding to all of this. I've gotten some things from Art that I haven't got in here yet. That's him right there in the front page, kneeling in the snow. And I have the White family. This first picture here is Stephen White Sr.'s tombstone, which I don't know if you took that when you were out there?
No.
Or somebody did. That is located out in Benson Burial Grounds. And this is information on him. Now, if you go into these web pages, you'll notice that there are some links here that are a different color. If you click on them, you can go to that page. Whether it's somebody's memorial or the information on a person. I've got zinc tombstones documenting the Verona Cemetery down the side. And you'll notice up at the top it says Mary White and Mary Black, which goes back to what Ed was talking about. I can't vouch they existed because they were my father's grandmothers. One became a Cher and one became a Black. I'm sorry, zinc. Addison was my great-great-grandfather. So when I've added a lot on here, I'm still adding. As you can see, there's not a lot of articles yet. I still have some more to add. Also, if you click up at the top, there is one for White School. That takes you to the page that I had up on there to begin with. It talks about when it was created, information on how they decided to build it, the meeting that was first held, and who attended it. People, names of Dr. Thomas Gordon, John Bowen, a Richardson, another well-known name in the area, Waddles, Rutherford, Cummins, Leslie, McDonald Sr. and Jr. And here's a picture on here that's from 1918. Is this the one that somebody was just asking me about?
Yeah, I asked about, because my mother is a teacher up there.
Oh, okay.
But that don't seem to jive.
That is, what I found on this page, a lot of it is research that I've done on newspapers.com, the Verona newspaper, Verona Press, a lot of other newspapers
Okay.
on the internet. And this is, underneath it is the article that goes with it.
Okay.
There's articles like Second Day at the Fair, Lunch Planning Success, Rural School Grades, Pupils, Safety Patrol, Children Mar 5 schools, and one of them was White School. Here's a picture of Mary Waddle Lloyd. This connects back to her, she was one of the early teachers. This connects back to her grave. I have information on. Lots of information on the awards, odds and ends, teachers, anything that I could find on the White School, photos, and go down to, I've got these in chronological order. So we're going down to the Hendersons that live just down the road from there. And an article on Jay and his daughter. That's who's this picture is.
Janie, it is. Janie.
Some more pictures, graduation. There's one of the Hagans. Right there.
Janie.
That's Phil.
That's
Phil.
Yeah, right here's,
Dale, that's Phil, isn't it?
Looks like my brother.
that's Phil,
That's Phil.
yeah. And I think that's Frank
Janie
Andrew,
live up by
yeah,
Mount Horton?
Yes.
right
Huh?
there.
Doesn't Janie live out by Mount
Yeah.
Horton?
Does she? I don't know. I haven't thought of her for years.
'Cause
Um,
I was
here's
at
a-
Here's that
yeah,
one
yeah.
teacher, that's
Yeah,
it, that's the one I have.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Here's the teacher here.
Teacher of the year, the white school.
Notice the flat top.
And there's a list here of other reunion articles. This page was getting a little long, so I split all of that off. And there is a tab up at the top for that. This lists over 100 former teachers, pupils, had an event on Fish Hatchery Road. A lot of these articles list people that attended, for those of you were there looking. And again, you'll notice
Hey, they got
cookies.
some cookies in.
A 5-minute break to get
The
cookies.
real reason we came.
No Cal.
You'll notice again, there's a difference in color in here in some of these. If you click on these names, it will take you to probably the cemetery information. A lot of these are buried in Verona. It's surprising the number of articles that I found on obituaries where people would say they attended White School or they taught school at White School. Here's another reunion. Oh, that's the same one that I was at. Okay.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, go back there.
This one?
My mother is the last one up there.
This one?
No,
Up here.
wait a minute.
Mr. Nevick was the last teacher, and she was the oldest teacher at that reunion.
Oh.
So they arranged them by the years that they taught there. So I was the most recent, and then that was Mrs. Keller behind me, and then they just ended up working their way back.
Can you name the teachers?
No, I
No, you
can't.
can't?
No, I
Oh.
can't do them all.
That's a good representation of.
We can rename the ones we choose.
Point.
Yeah, I found that in the Wisconsin State Journal in 1965's paper.
Yeah, I,
Okay, over on the right side, you'll notice some other information. When the school was built, its location,
Yeah, Mrs. Powell.
the note that classes were taught by Addison White and Marietta Scherer. The first meeting, my dedication of this blog to Addison. And information here, if you want to contact me, you can always use this to contact me. I've got a list of all the teachers that I could find, anybody that I found in articles, no matter what they were, of the teachers, and in some cases, the years. And if they are deceased, I was able to find or create a Find a Grave memorial. If you click again on the different color, you can go to that person's cemetery memorial. So I've got quite a few in here, but I'm sure I don't have all of them. Again, with the students at White, I did the same thing. Everything I could find with names, adding dates if I had them, and links for any of you that are looking for relatives or might have attended there and aren't yet deceased. So there isn't another connection. And down on the bottom, you notice there's labels. And if you click on those labels, like Elmer Gordon has 5. He was one of the teachers there for quite a while. So if you click on that, it'll take you to his other articles. So that's what those are.
Yeah, he was in that lineup. He
And
was
this
there.
down below that are some odds and ends of information that I found, like the school board, Oliver Hensel, Gilman Thomas, Evan
Thompson.
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 I'm sorry, Thompson.
Yeah.
and there was
Yeah.
Mrs. Nealon too.
So
He was
if
a
you
teacher. He was a
do
school
go
board
through this
member.
page, or if you found anything today, anything you want to add, photos, articles, if you got something, some information.
I always thought that
I've
was
got
kinda
some
weird.
labels up here that have
School board
my
didn't have any kids.
phone number, my mailing address, and my email address on them.
You
So
probably
you
got that
can
job
send
for
me
life.
anything that you want to add to this, because I'm still actively gathering whatever I can on it. Something that Art also asked me today is, since we worked so diligently on the Verona Cemetery, and I've put together a blog for that, which is this page, if I do a presentation in the future on this. So I won't go through everything that's in here and all the connections. But that is there, and that's the easiest place to get to the White information if you can't find it. There's also a connection here to the Dane County Hospital and Home Cemetery. And all the information that I've gathered on that, since that's another cemetery in the area. And there's also a new one for cremation burial. I'll be adding a connection for that too, since it's a Roma cemetery. Anybody have any questions?
No, I have a comment. You had a teacher out
Uh-huh.
there that I had as a principal in Sussex for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it was Doyle Alexander.
Oh, Mr. Alexander.
Here was his favorite student.
Oh.
I was told that.
Yeah.
I thought I was.
Well, we thought we were.
Okay, I'm hearing another one on the other side of the room. Did he tell this to all the students?
Isn't that?
When Doyle Alexander was at White School and that, in the wintertime, sometimes the marsh would freeze over
And we put correct.
and it would become like a skating area. And we would vote, otherwise we'd have a recess in the morning and the afternoon and noontime. And he allowed us to vote if we wanted to have just one recess a day. And then we would usually say yes, and we'd take it all at lunchtime. And then we'd all go down to the marsh. And some had ice skates, or you just slide around on the marsh area and that. And I don't know, you know, that was quite a fun thing, I always thought.
How many years was he at the White School?
5 years.
And he was in Sussex until his death.
Now, we have someone here who was a teacher there.
Yes.
Would you have a few comments?
Eric Nivick, yeah. Yeah, I suppose I could.
Bet you can tell.
Sure.
Bet you can tell.
Yeah, that's true.
Beyond us.
Could you beat the microphone? It comes
Go
off.
easy, Mike.
It comes
I
off.
didn't prepare anything.
coffee and cookies over here.
Maybe that's a good idea for them to do that. I was the last teacher at White. I was there for 2 years. I came in 1963, and then they already were talking about consolidation in the Verona area. But those are 2 of the years that are really dear to my heart. Now, I don't want to get emotional here. I'm going to, I know. When I came to Verona, or to White School for my interview, I had 7 interviews lined up in West Dane County, as you call it at the time. And I was to meet with the school board, and I got to White School, and of course I was kind of intrigued, because as I drove in, I realized that there was a privy over here, and there was a privy over there. I realized we were going to have outside bathrooms, you know. But anyway, and that's going to be a story I'm going to share with you in a minute. But anyway, the board members were going to meet me there at school, and Bertha Henderson, maybe many of you remember Bertha, and then the Thompson, that Gilman, and the 2 of them were there. And they were waiting on the 3rd board member. And so we kind of sat there for a little while, and et cetera, and pretty soon I heard a motorcycle start up, and Bertha says, "Oh, here comes the other board member now," and it was Eldon Himsel.
She started laughing.
We went through the interview, and I really enjoyed meeting him. I liked what I was hearing about the school. And then we got to the final comment, and at that time we were talking salary. And they told me what they would offer me as a teacher there at White School, and I was young. I was just out of college. I wasn't inhibited, and naturally I just said to them, "Oh no, I'd never come down here to teach for less than this amount." And they all 3 of them went, like this, you know. And they said, "Oh no, we could never pay a teacher that amount." Okay, because I'm thinking, you know, I still got 6 more interviews, you know, I was young. Well, by the time I got back home, Bertha had called, and they had decided that they really wanted me as a teacher, and so I ended up coming to White School.
What's that salary, tell us?
I can't remember.
Oh.
I'd have to go look. I still have the contract. But I can't tell you right now. Anyway, I got to White School, started my school year, and et cetera. And the first storm came up, and it started raining. All of a sudden, my 2 8th grade girls got up, went in the back room, and they came out with pots, pans, and whatever. and they just went around the classroom, and they set one down over here, and they set one over there, and pretty soon, ping, ping, ping. They knew exactly where they were supposed to go. Well, anyway, I mean, that was just part of it. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I truly enjoyed meeting the families in the White School District, getting a little bit of the history, becoming part of the district itself. One of my special memories is that recesses, we always negotiated too. And that always worked out well. Steve was one of the former students, he knows how that went. They worked 3 times as hard once we got back inside. But anyway, at one of the recesses, I went out to the boys' bathroom, and I walked in, and Godfrey, somebody had urinated up the wall and clear up on the ceiling, and I'm standing there looking, and of course at that stage of the game, I was the bathroom maintenance person for both of them, And anyway, so I come back out, and I was just steaming, and I got all of the boys together, and I lined them up, and I said, okay, what happened, And they're all standing there, neat guys, and finally one of the boys raised his hand, and I said, well, what happened? And he said, I don't know, Mr. Nimick, it just got away from me. And of course, here I was steaming, and I looked at him for a minute, and I just went, don't let that happen again. That night after they left, there I'm sitting at my desk, laughing and laughing. It's one of the most precious memories that I have. But that was White School. I loved it, and I loved the people there. Thank you, guys.
How many did you have in that? How many did you have in that group?
How many
students?
How many students?
Yeah, at that time.
I think I had, the first year, there was 18, I think.
Wow.
Was that right? Yeah. And the second year must have been about the same. I think it stayed about the same. Well, I got a picture, I guess, don't I?
One here.
You want to get up, stand up?
I got plenty of stuff here. I'm gonna pass this around, it's my contact address and information, anybody wants one, take a label one.
Let's get the microphone back up there again.
Well, my notes start back with Solomon White, and I find that his father, Stephen and Mary, like you said,
Yes.
and they were born out east and died in Verona. Anyway, Solomon White was my great-grandfather. He was born in Hartford, state of New York, in 1819. And he came to Wisconsin in 1846. At the same area like other families were coming to Wisconsin. There was a Dunkel family in Pennsylvania that came to Wisconsin. And Solomon White married Mary Ann Dunkel here in Verona area, when they got here in Verona area. Solomon was 34 years old when he got married, and Mary Ann was 32. And Solomon died in 1897. He was 78 years old. And his wife, Mary Ann Dunkel, died at age 93 in 1923 in Verona. so this Mary Ann Dunkel was a widow for 26 years. And they had children, 7 children, I'll just go over the list. Emmeline, George White, Martha White, Milo White, Matilda White, Laura White, and Oscar White. Oscar White built that big house right beside the Memorial Baptist Church. That was where Milo lived. And Martha White lived upstairs when I was a little girl. And I come through the Laura White line. And Laura was born in 1865, and she died in 1949 at 83 years of age. And she married Henry Himsel. And he was 20 years old when they got married, and Laura was 19. And they had children. Clara became Mrs. Joseph Bryan. My dad, Wells Henry Himsel, and Margie, who became Mrs. Brader, and Orville, who married Emma, that worked for Dr. Wyland at the time. And then there was Ruth and Truly, twins. And Truly died at birth, but Ruth became Mrs. Gordon, Elmer Gordon's wife. 2 of the grandchildren of Solomon married school teachers. My dad, Wells, married Grace Hazeltine, and Ruth married Elmer Gordon. Let's see. I'll try to move this along here. And that one picture, and I have lots of pictures, they're 100 years old. Verona buildings, the main street of Verona. The first car that my dad bought in 1913. One of the first cars. And he was always getting stuck in the mud. He'd tell us about that every spring. I think it was a Maxwell. The picture is in there of it. So we've heard lots of stories that happened around the White School and White District. Actually, and there's a picture of Solomon White's house and barn back in those early days. And Solomon White's home was just separated from the school by the orchard. The orchard was between Solomon's house and the White School. Let's see. Well, my mother, Grace Hazeltine, went to teach there in 1913 and 14 and 15 and 16. She was raised in Mazomanie. That was her home. And I have old things there. My dad must have liked, they boarded with Henry Hemsel's family, my dad's mother and dad. So the teacher boarded there. So she boarded there for, I think, 14 years. But my dad must have liked her because I see he sends her a Christmas card in 1913, and that's when she started teaching. Sent it down to Mazomanie to her. And the next year, the same fancy Christmas card sent to Mazomanie. So they had quite a time. My dad and my mother and Clara and Margie were all about the same age, 2 or 3 years. So the 4 of them went to every box social in the school areas, went to picnics. I got pictures of where they were out to Mount Vernon to that Chimney Rock. It probably isn't there anymore.
It's there.
And they were having a jolly old time. And then my dad in 1913 got this car. And I think it's because he wanted to go down to Maizemini in the summertime to see my mother all the time. Because that's what he did. And I think for 3 years anyway, they were a couple going around. And his two sisters begging to go with him because they wanted to ride in that car. So I got a picture in Vilas Park way back there in 1913. And I could just see his sisters. Dad was going to take her into Vilas Park. And it says, we want to go too, we want to go, we want to ride the car too, we won't bother you. So they got to go. And sure enough, the picture, Clara took her camera. And that's why I have so many pictures with the dates on and the places. And they were tagging along behind this couple. The picture Clara took was from the back. She identifies them. But they had a lot of fun in those days, we can imagine. So after like 3 years, I think, of him being around with Grace, and I suppose down Maizemini in the summers a lot, and my mother's mother talked to Wells. Says, don't you have any intentions of getting married? He said, oh, she said, I think you ought to marry Grace or leave her alone. And he said, I don't want to leave my nice home, my siblings, and all the good times we're having. Well, it wasn't very long till Grace started calling the shots. Isn't that cool? So she had news for him. She told him next September I'm going to be teaching in South Dakota. And she did. She went to Millbank, South Dakota, and took a school. But that was 1918, when the flu season was going through here. Well, my mother's youngest brother died with that flu. He'd just begun the University of Madison. He was 17 years old. He got that flu and he died in October. So my mother was back in this area for the funeral. And in the few days she was home, she went to the dime stores at Madison. And lo and behold, she ran into Wells, and he wanted to get married. She said, I'm finishing my school in South Dakota first. After that. And she told her close friend, she kept track all her life with Nellie, from Whitewater, normal days, and told her. And she ran into Wells, and now he wants to get married. So she spread it among their Whitewater friends. Grace found her husband in the dime store. Well, the short of it is that they got married November 10th, 1919, in Maizemini at the big Hazeltine home. And there was an upstairs there, a big house. And the story went that the pastor and my dad and his brother Orville were to go upstairs, wait for the ceremony to begin. They were to be upstairs. So they were upstairs, and the pastor says, Wells, do you want to change your mind? If you do, you better jump out of this window. Well, he didn't jump out of the window. But anyway, those pictures there of Verona roads and cars and houses and buildings, the high school, are 100 years old. Clara took most of them and labeled everything.
And don't forget now, get those for Georgia so she can put those in there.
Yeah. There's one other thing I was going to say. Oh, in my dad's first house on North Schumann. And there was a barn there. So his little sister Ruth Hensel was the only one to go to high school. And my dad had a horse and a nice sorrel horse and a buggy still on the farm. And he said, Ruth, if you want to drive my horse and buggy to school, high school every day, that's fine. And there's a barn on in the lot where we live, and you can put the horse and buggy there, and I'll have water and hay in there for the horse. So that she went to high school that way. 3 years she finished high school. And my dad, when he left the farm, went to work for J.C. Brown at the Riley Garage. Took what they called the cannonball train back and forth from Riley to Verona for 3 years. And then J.C. Brown brought him to Verona, where he had a showroom of new cars, and my dad was selling new cars for him. My mother and dad lived 5 years in Verona, and while he was there, he kept up the fire truck. That meant he had to drive it about every 2 weeks and see that it was in shape to go anytime, anywhere. And he enjoyed doing that. But he said if he had a boy, he was going back to farming. He went down by Peoline, and that's where I was raised.
Well, we sure want to thank you so much.